Hello everyone and welcome. In this video, we are going to learn how to make a Basque Gathered dress. Now my pattern is on a fold, so I started by drafting my start line, and then from the start line, I went down to mark the chest point, the bust point, the under bust point, the waist point, as well as half an inch for sewing allowance. Now I marked this point again, and then I went ahead to connect all these points with a ruler. After that, from the top, I came in by 3 inches and I came down by 2.5 inches and connected these 2 points together to form the neckline. From the start again, I came in by half of the shoulder measurement and marked it down. And on the chest line, I marked the same thing. And then I connected both points together. Now on the shoulder line, I came down by half an inch and connected it to the neckline to form the shoulder slope. And on this line that we drew, I found the midpoint and came in by half an inch. Then on the chest line, I went ahead to mark quarter of the bust measurement plus half an inch sewing allowance. And then I connected these points together to form the armhole curve. After that, the next thing we're going to do is to draft our darts. Now for the darts, I came in by 3.5 inches on the waistline, the under bust line, and the bust line. After marking it down, I connected all these points with a ruler. And then on both sides of the line, on just the waist and under bust, I came in by half an inch. Now this is a basic princess dart, not a bustier, which is why I am using just half an inch. After that, I connected this line we drew to the bust line just as you can see, with my curved rule on one side and a slightly straight rule on the other side. Then on the bust line again, I came up by half an inch to eliminate any form of pointiness, and then from that half an inch, I connected it to the midpoint of the armhole. Now, after connecting it, we are done with our dart. I'm not going to take any dart on the armhole line because I am drafting on the fabric, and while sewing the armhole together, that will serve as a dart. So the next thing I went ahead to do was to mark out the full body measurements. On the chest line and the bust line, I marked quarter of the bust measurements. Now on this armhole, I went ahead to add extra 1 inch for allowance. This is not supposed to be so because I did not add any darts in the armhole. So I did this out of habit and it's a mistake, so ignore this. Now after that, I went ahead to continue marking the round body measurement. On the waistline, I marked quarter of the waist measurement plus the 1 inch dart we took plus 1 extra inch for sewing of the darts and our 1.5 inch for sewing allowance. So mind you, I also added sewing allowance on the bust and chest line. So when I was done, I connected all these points together. Now on the waistline, to make sure that the front waistline aligns with that of the back, I came up by 1 inch, which is the difference between the front and the back waist points. After coming up by 1 inch, I came in by the 1.5 inch sewing allowance and blended it to the full length of the front. And that was it. Now on the shoulder slope again, I went ahead to add half an inch, which is going to serve as joining allowance for the shoulder region. After that, I went ahead to cut this out. Now we are done with the front, so now let's move over to the back. For the back now, as you all can see, I've already drawn my start line and our fabric is also on a fold. Now on that fold, I came in by 1 inch from the top to the end just for our zip allowance line. Now every other measurement we take is going to be from that line. So from that line, I came in by 3 inches, I came down by 1 inch and connected them together to form the neckline. Now after that, I forgot to mark our various points. So here I marked the chest line, the bust line, the waistline, and half an inch allowance. I did that again and then I went ahead to connect all these points with a ruler. After that, from the start line, I went ahead to mark half of the shoulder measurement plus half an inch allowance. I marked the same thing on the chest line and then I connected both points together. After that, again on the shoulder line, I came down by half an inch and connected it with a rule to the neckline. And then on this line, I found the midpoint and marked it down. And on the chest line, I marked quarter of the bust measurement plus half an inch allowance. And then I connected all these points together. Now on the slope, I came up by half an inch and redrew a line for shoulder joining allowance. Now on the waistline, because we do not want any bulginess on that waist region, I came in by half an inch and connected it to the top. Now I am using half an inch here because I'm sewing for a small sized person. Ideally, I usually use 1 inch on the waist region. After drawing this line, I came in again by 1 inch to retrace my zipper allowance line. Now that we're done with that, it's time to mark the round body measurement. So on the chest line and the bust line, I went ahead to mark quarter of the bust measurement plus 1.5 inch sewing allowance. While on the waistline, I went ahead to mark quarter of the waist measurement plus 1 inch for that because I'm going to be sewing a dart on this, as well as 1.5 inch for sewing allowance. And when I was done, I went ahead to connect all these points together. Now after connecting, I went ahead to cut it out. Now we are done with the back, so now it's time for us to draft the basque effect. So as usual, we're going to start by drafting our start line. From the start line, you'll go ahead and mark where you want your basque to stop. So I want mine to stop at the hip point, so I came down by 9 inches and added half an inch for allowance. Now on the start line, which is going to be the waistline, I came in by quarter of the waist measurements plus 1 inch for that because I want to add a dart on this, as well as 1.5 inch sewing allowance, and then I marked it down. Now on the full length of our basque, which is the hip line, I came in by a quarter of the hip measurement plus 1.5 inch sewing allowance, and then I connected these points together. Now the next thing we are going to determine is where do you want your sides to begin from. So I want mine to be 5 inches below the waistline. So I marked that down, added half an inch for sewing allowance. And here I'm just trying to connect from that 5 inches down to the full length of the basque. So this connection, you can connect it with a straight rule if you want, but I want mine to be curved. So if you notice, I started by coming in by 1.5 inch, my sewing allowance, and then from that 1.5 inch, I drew my curved line all the way to the center of the basque. I hope you understand. So this is it for the basque. Now when I was done, I went ahead to add half an inch on the top of the bags just to be for sewing allowance to connect the bags to the top. And then from that line again, I came down by half an inch and slided it to the side. But while sliding, be mindful of your 1.5 inch sewing allowance. Now this half an inch I'm coming down by is just to make sure that the stomach region sits properly. So after that, you can just go ahead and cut out your basque. So this is the basque for the front. Now the next thing we're going to do is to use this to cut the basque for the back. Now for the back, I left a 1.5 inch space at the front before placing the basque. Now this 1.5 inch is going to serve as 1 inch for zipper allowance as well as half inch for butt adjustments. Okay. Now when I was done tracing, I went ahead to cut out the basque. Now after cutting out the basque, this is it for the back basque, and this back is on a fold as usual, so keep that in mind. Now the next thing I went ahead to do was to mark close to the hip region. You can mark the hip region if you want, but I didn't want any form of bulginess. So on the waist region, I came in by half an inch, and then I connected a rule to that point I marked. And after that, I went ahead to cut out any excesses that we had. So this is it for our basque, as you all can see. So the next thing I went ahead to do was to trim out any excesses. So ideally our back is going to be a bit longer on the side because we adjusted the stomach region for the front. Now the next thing we're going to do is to cut out our keyhole neckline. If you all remember, this is a Basque dress with a keyhole neckline. So from the start, I came down by 5 inches for the keyhole neckline and marked it down. So on that 5 inches, I came in by half an inch for the opening because I don't want it to be too wide. Now from that half an inch we came in by, I used the curve rule just to slant it to the front of the fabric. Now I'm connecting this keyhole to the start of the fabric at the top because when we sew round this keyhole, our sewing allowance is still going to widen it a bit, so we don't want it to be too wide. Now the next thing we're going to do is to start sewing. So placing our fabric right sides facing each other, we'll go ahead and sew from the down all the way to the top. Now for the back of the dress, we'll just go ahead and sew our darts. So for the darts from our zipper allowance line, we'll come in by our 3.5 inch nipple to nipple measurement. So I notched that point, and then beside the point, I came in by half an inch, which is going to serve as our dart measurement. Now on the chest line again, I came in by the same 3.5 inch and connected it to our first 3.5 inch. Now for that half an inch I came out by, I'm going to slant it to the top of the chest, but as you all can see, I didn't slant it directly to the top, just to make sure that our seam is smooth. So we're going to sew from the down to the top for the darts, and we'll do this for both sides. Now for our basque, from the midpoint of our front basque, we will come in by the same 3.5 inches, and then on maybe you come down by 4 or 5 inches and mark the same 3.5 inches there and connect your line together. Then on the side of the line, you will come in by half an inch again and slant it to your original line and sew from the wider part to the thinner parts. Okay, so the same thing you do for one side, you do for the other side as well. For the back basque as well, you will take note of your 1 inch zipper allowance line, and from there you will come in by 3.5 inch. You come down by 4 inches and come in by 3.5 inch at that 4 inches mark, and then on one side you will come in by half an inch, slant it to your original line and sew from the wider part to the thinner part, and that is it for your darts. So you do the same thing for both sides. Okay, now the next thing I went ahead to do was to draft the sleeves. So for the sleeves, I'm going to start by marking the bicep line. The bicep is the fullest part of your arm. So for her, I marked it down, and then I went ahead to mark the full length of the sleeve. So she wants a long sleeve, so I'm still going to add extra material to that. Now for the bicep line, I went ahead to mark the round armhole measurement, and then I connected it to the top of the fabric, as you all can see. Then I located the midpoint of the line, and using the fuller part of my cord rule, I connected from the midpoint to the top and then from the midpoint to the end of the line. After that, at the full length of our sleeve, I went ahead to mark exactly what I have on our bicep line. And then because this is a bell sleeve, just like our A-line dress, after marking what you have on the bicep, you will add your extra inches to make it a bell. So my client wants this sleeve to be extremely wide, so I think I added extra 10 inches, but that was too much. I would advise that you go for 3 inches extra or 2 inches or highest 4 inches extra. So after I was done, on the sides of the sleeve, I'm going to come up by 2 inches and slide it to the middle and cut it out. But I'm not going to cut this out now because I still want to add extra length to this sleeve. My clients want the sleeve to be extremely long. So when I add extra length, I'm going to make the scuff. So now that I'm done, I went ahead to cut out the sleeve. So for the back, as you all can see, I've done my darts. For the basque as well, I've sewn the darts as well as for the back basque. Now for the front, as you all can see, I've sewn it up together. And for the keyhole neckline, I used a bias to turn it over. Now for this dress, we're not going to be using a lining, so we're just going to sew it straight up. Now I went ahead to find the midpoint of the front as well as the midpoint of our basque, and then placing both midpoints together, right sides facing each other, I will sew them up together. So for the back, I did the same thing and sewed them together, and this is how the front is as well. Now the next thing I went ahead to do was to find the full measurement of the down part of our basque, After finding the full measurement, I multiplied it by 4 and I used that what I got to cut out this fabric. So the length of this material depends on how long you want your dress to be. While for the width, I used what I got when I multiplied it. Now, after cutting this material, I divided it into two. One is going to be for the back and one is going to be for the front. So this is one part of the fabric which I'm going to attach to the front. As you all can see, I notched the midpoint, and from midpoint to midpoint, I sewed it all the way to the top. And for the back as well, I did the same thing for both sides of it. So we are almost done with this dress. As you all can see, I've joined the shoulders of both the back and the front together. Now the next thing we're going to do is to line the neckline. And our neckline has a tie rope on it. So to attach that, I measured the neckline from the back to the front, one side of the neckline. And what I got, I marked it down. Then from the end of the front, I measured all the way to where I want my rope to stop, and I used that to cut out this rope as you all can see. So this rope now is going to serve for both the front and the back. It is 2 inches wide and the length is just like we calculated. So after that, now it's time for us to attach it to our dress. So for attaching it to the dress, I'm going to start just like we attach our bias on a dress. I'll start on the wrong side and sew right sides facing each other on the wrong side of the neckline, and then I'm going to turn it over to the right side and turn our strip as well to the right side and fold it over. As you can see, I'll fold it once and then fold it again, and then I'll sew on it. So I'll fold it once, fold it again, and then I'll sew on it. So when I reach the end of the neckline, I'll just keep folding and sewing them together as you can see. And the same thing I did for this side, I did it for the other side, okay? So now I'm done attaching and folding our neckline. This is our tie rope and it is looking pretty. Now the next thing we're going to do is to attach our sleeves to the dress. So turning it over to the armhole side, we're going to bring our sleeves, and as you all can see, I've added the extra length that I told you all that I would. So placing it right sides facing each other, we're going to sew it into the armhole for both sides of the dress. So I'm done sewing the sleeves as you all can see. Now the next thing we're going to do is to attach zipper to our dress. Now turning the dress over to the back side, we're going to make sure that all the points of the dress align. Make sure that the waist region, very important, make sure that the waist region is aligned, and then you measure from the top all the way to where you want your zip to stop. So me, I measured it all the way to 1 inch below the basque, and from the backs down I will sew them together, while from the top to that point I added a zipper. So now that we're done with the zipper, the next thing we're going to do is to join the dress together. As you all can see, on the end of the sleeve, I lined it with a bias. So using a sewing allowance, we're going to sew all the way from the sleeve down to the end of our fabric. So with this, we have come to the end of our tutorial. I hope you all enjoyed it and I hope you found it helpful. So if you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, like, and share. Thank you.